For a while. What's that?
Our
Last time we met.
meeting was 3 months ago.
Feels like a long time ago.
Long time.
November, I think. December, we got, it's year end and.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Community Development Committee meeting to order, February 11th session. Kelly, have you had an opportunity to take the attendance?
Yes. Thank you. We're good.
Perfect. Thank you. I have a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Yeah, Tim Scammell did, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Seconder,
I'll second.
Tim and Tim.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Any conflict of interest to disclose? No conflict of interest. At this point, I'll turn it over to Lise.
All right, I guess I'm going to be talking about ESIC and OPT 4. So basically, ESIC is the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation, which is a crown corporation of the provincial government. I just want to make sure everybody is clear about the work of ESIC. So they're the ones who've been tasked with looking after the poverty file for all of New Brunswick. And the way that they do their work is through the SIN coordinator, so the Community Inclusion Network. And I am the SIN coordinator for Region 11. And as you know, there were consultations all over New Brunswick in the past year. And they have taken all that information and categorized it and analyzed it and come up with 16 different initiatives that will be presented at the public meeting on February 19th. Now, on February 18th, the SIN coordinators will get together to talk about a copy of these initiatives under embargo until the next day. But elected officials are invited to Hamilton for the ESIC OPT4 launch, where they will talk about the initiatives. Some of them will be to be undertaken by the Department of Health. Some will belong to the Department of Social Development, but some will be what they call SINable. So in other words, it will be up to each region's SIN coordinator to develop a plan for the region along with all the partners in Region 11 and all its entities for the coming years. So stay tuned on February 19th. That is where we will obtain the actual initiatives. And I suspect some of the major files would be, of course, transportation, especially for those with disabilities or in rural areas. That is a theme that keeps coming up. And it applies to so many other files. You can get, it's how to get to the food bank, it's how to get to your medical appointments, but it's how to get to all services and thereby preventing social isolation. And of course, funding comes with ESIC to do all of these strategies and these initiatives. So yes, I guess that's, I'm not sure if there's anything else that I should mention, John or Carrie, about
No, I think just contextually, the reason that we are involved with ESIC at this time is as a result of local government reform. Part of those changes required the regional service commissions to absorb the community inclusion networks that were in their region. And it was a move to, with a view to try to eliminate duplication and also provide a bit more rigorous oversight than what had existed in the past, where many of the SIN correctors were out in the province sort of feeling very much on their own. So our relationship with ESIC has been good. They help fund staff positions. And we also help administer a series of grants each year. We get a pool of $50,000 for grants that qualify under their overcoming poverty strategy. So we haven't done any 2025 grants yet, but we spent the money for 2024 and you know, trying to make a difference.
Thank you, Lise. Next up on the agenda, the resiliency update. Carrie.
Wonderful, thank you. So to follow up from Lisa's presentation, the topic comes up a lot around like governance reform and alignment, and so that's exactly what we've done with our resiliency profile. So Capital Regional Resiliency Network was formed. So far as back to 2021, I've been in the role for 2 years now, and we've led us through 2 resiliency action plan years. So we're a mandate through Justice and Public Safety under the Community Capacity and Resiliency branch. My role as a part-time coordinator is to basically build that alignment and try to prevent some of that duplication that Don referred to earlier. And this has been a really great partnership with the Service Commission because we are taking that regional approach. So we cover the same boundary lines as Region 11. We're basically working towards how do we build resilient communities, build capacity in communities, with the lens of, we know that bad days are coming, and sometimes that's unpreventable, but we get through that by building connections with our community, and factor back into the level of resilience amongst our communities. So in December, we wrapped up our Regional Resiliency Action Plan for 2024. And up until that, we've been working on very common priorities that Lise would be working on with ESIC, some of the priorities that are happening here at the Service Commission as well. And we work together to build long-term action plans with a number of diverse stakeholders. So we were successful in wrapping up our 2024 year. We're heading into 2025, and we still have some really great partnerships at the table and some really interesting projects coming forward. So some of the key areas that I'm seeing is, you know, general capacity building. How do we align those different sectors that might be working still in the silos? So I know myself personally, I come from healthcare, but a lot of theories that healthcare is seeing, our education field is seeing, some of the public safety items that come up are very relevant across the different sectors. So I like to call it my virtual sandbox. So we bring everybody together and really use the gifts that we're all bringing to see what type of community we can build together with each gift and asset that comes to the table. So we have a number of projects, some that we're carrying over from 2024 this year, some that we're starting out or building upon. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to go through, and feel free to ask questions. I don't want to talk at you, so if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. So one of the first projects that we're building on in our partnerships is the topic of health promoting schools. And so this is in partnership with Anglophone West School District and working with our Healthy School Learners. So basically the concept of this is how do we build our schools up so that they have access to, you know, community around them. And so much of that, they might be working on individual team-based pieces at each school. The other piece to this is that oftentimes if you're in one school, you're not connecting with others. So this builds that network amongst schools that they can share resources for and learn from. So that's a project that has been underway. Our Healthy School Learners team has been in our schools and have asked, you know, what's the interest? Here's the framework. It's a bit of like credentials, I'll say, to kind of build it up so that your school is health promoting. And they're working with a number of subject coordinators, community partners, you name it. Another exciting one that's happening in March, this is an expansion of the NACWIC program that we funded last year, is the Youth Engagement Summit. So we call them Yes Days. And so they're convening 5 schools in Cambridge Narrows in March, and I don't have the date just yet. But it's basically consulting with our youth on how do we build community connections, how do we combat issues like social isolation, connectivity in community, drug, alcohol, those pieces. So it's really hearing from our youth and what that looks like. The third project we're working on is simply called the Come Over Project. They came up with a really cool acronym and I need to think of it here. So it's called Capacity Building in Mental Health Services for Older Adults. And this is a really unique partnership with UNB. Dr. Lindsay Crump is a clinical psychologist. And we're partnering with partners like Meals on Wheels, Nursing Home Without Walls, on how do we give better access to those seniors that might be seeing isolation, in terms of accessing better mental health. So instead of having, it could be grief support, we're bringing those partners to the table. So part of our partnership is helping with transportation to come to those sessions. It's also building a community with those seniors that attend. So there's diverse partners there that are helping to lead that program this year. And that's shows an example of Resiliency's funding $2,000, but ESIC partnership, we've been able to submit for $8,000. So that's a total $10,000 partnership that we're working towards. The fourth Resiliency project is supporting people living with a disability, more or less, in helping them access services. So again, we have a couple of different folks coming to the table on this. I referenced Dr. Lindsay Crump, who's a clinical psychologist at the Wellness Center. They'll be working on how do we, there's folks that fall through the cracks every day in terms of not having a diagnosis. And we see that in terms of either low IQ or folks that just aren't accessing those services that they should be from a younger age and become adults. And so she's seen this in her practice, upwards of 5 people last year where they really just didn't have a diagnosis. So that meant that they couldn't access the services that they needed. So the UNB had funding to support that, to give them a proper diagnosis that helped them to open the doors for so much more support. So part of that funding will work with that team. The other part is working with the Centers of Excellence with the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. We know that they have a lot of, they've done some research on what does pet therapy look like for folks living with autism, varying other mental health conditions. But we know that pet therapy is approved resource that could help them. So they're working on a project that could help connect what those resources could look like. And then all together, we're coming and seeing where are their unmet needs at amongst both of those populations. Can we work together with other partners to see how do we really help with that wraparound service that our individuals need? So I'm really excited for that one. Any questions so far? I get really excited about this stuff, if you can't tell.
I'm wondering how you access, I'm interested in that one, but disability.
Yeah.
Having trouble accessing services.
Yeah.
That's, my wife and I do things and we see this stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't want to ask too many personal questions.
Yeah.
And so how do they access this program?
For that piece, so part of that, where some of the funding is going, some of it would be self-referral through UNB's Wellness Center, if that's kind of part of that project there. And they'll help to refer and help for the diagnosis per se. If it's around like fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, autism, things like that, I would point you to our project lead, Lisa Taylor. She's with Vitalite, and they're supporting a number of various folks living in the community with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder that they could connect you in with for sure. The other partner that's at the table is Ability New Brunswick, and we're hoping that we can really build on this as well in terms of, we know that there's many other nonprofit organizations that are servicing this clientele. How do we get them all in the same sandbox, so to speak, and work together on, you've got this, I've got this, how can we work and build up those unmet needs? So in a roundabout way, I can connect you with those people, would be, to put simply.
If I learn with people, just say.
Yeah.
Take care.
Exactly, yeah, and then I'll send them on. Excuse me, the other person I'm thinking of is 211. And so we're working closely with some of their unmet needs as well. And so Daniela has presented to our committee. Excuse me, she's presented here. And then that's a way for us to kind of start to weave some of those pieces together. Any question? Any others? And you'll see a lot of similarity too as we present.
See some overlap. for
There's
sure.
some overlap, so we are trying to work smarter on that. I'll wrap up a few of the other pieces here. Building off some of our other mental health work, we have the Fredericton Suicide Prevention Committee, is working towards building. But what they were finding is that sometimes the funding needs don't necessarily match what the program needs are. So we were able to give, not a lot of money, but $6,000 to the Fredericton Suicide Prevention Committee to help with a mini grant program. So this was essentially building off the Safe Talk programming we offered last year. So if, someone wanted to do a guided journaling, if they wanted to do a Safe Talk presentation, there was some funding stream that could support some of that work. And that would be, overall, those applications would be overseen by the Fredericton Suicide Prevention Committee. They're also servicing outside of Fredericton too. That's a key point to mention. I actually had a meeting with one of the individuals that we sent for the Safe Talk training last night, and they were able to look at servicing in the village of Arcadia, and she's a paramedic herself and things like that. So that is starting to stir just around that network already. The other project is around kind of connecting our food security partners. So you may recall we did in the fall the food security forum, so Nourishing Communities. So Shauna Miller is a public health dietitian. And she convened a lot of our foodies, I'll say, across the region. We had virtual watch parties as well. So I know I attended one in Arcadia, that's where I'm at. There was a group in Fredericton and a group in Minto and Chipman, I believe. And so we were able to kind of bring people together and learn about what food security truly is. And then also hear ideas of what's happening across the region. In follow-up, this work, what we'll do is how do we keep that momentum going forward? How do we reach out to each of our municipalities and find those champions that are doing the good work around food security? With a layer of supporting our local growers, which is very timely in this political world we're in right now. And how do we talk about school food? I know that's a big topic in our world right now, considering our announcement on Friday. But how do we get all of those players across all the ages working together? The seventh project is their Community Connections Program. And this is working towards social isolation. And again, this is another priority of our commission too. We're working with Lynn Ouellette from St. Thomas University, who's helping us to kind of champion building those community connectors, which is a program based from 211. So to your question earlier, how do I access to these pieces? We're hoping to build up those local champions that can be those informal connectors to these programs. And then in summary, we have four projects from the previous year that we're still working towards because of timelines and things happen. We were able to keep the programs moving forward, but we're going to keep that open. One of them is the Volunteer Connections Program. So this was originally called Connect Fredericton, I believe. And so we have some funding that will support the host organization, and Lise will talk about that later. Another really exciting one, and I know it hits close to home for folks in Nakawik, is the gathering spaces. So we've actually been able to bottle up what's been inside the Nakawik Wellness Team's brain to learn what they've done in the Nakawik area for the gathering space. And we're really building an informal group of how do we expand this. And I don't know if Cheryl's on the call or not, but Cheryl's been key on how do we move this to the Harvey location. We have some interest from Grand Lake area, village of Arcadia as well. So it's essentially an informal gathering space for us to really connect with each other.
I can tell you some interesting information
Yeah.
about what developed in the last couple of weeks. The grocery store, which is a Loblaws independent store, was very important in helping the gathering place to get established with rent and so on. And that store has been recognized as the store in New Brunswick. There's one store in the province by Loblaws for their community development
Incredible.
or contribution. And so I went to that celebration of the two the owners, David and her husband. And one of the things I heard was that like they're going to a conference that Loblaws puts on for all these winners and so on. And they're thinking of trying to find ways to duplicate what they did for the gathering place
Fantastic,
for their stores across Canada.
right?
So it's kind of interesting, the reach that it seems to be having.
Incredible impact. And
Location has helped a lot too, I think,
Yeah.
the fact that it's in the same model.
The location right next door is essential and,
Yeah.
you know, it's really important, but
yeah,
that's a busy spot.
it is. And to that note too, we talked about, the Community Connector Program and Lynn led. Lynn has been working on this project with us as well to understand what is the secret sauce to making this work? So she's been able to interview patrons, and that's all part of the toolkit that they're developing of, you know, this is what works, this is what doesn't, and these are kind of things to look at if you're trying to start a gathering space in your community. No, it's incredible, and some of the stories that Lynn shared, like I'm looking forward to sharing it at this table once it's finalized, but it's it gives you goosebumps for sure. Yeah. Two other pieces to add in. So from last year, we did a project called Neighborhood Connections, and this was Suzanne White had led this as part of the commission and GFSI. But essentially the small micro grants that went towards building communities and having them come together. So you know, the block party phenomenon, and we did a lot of corn boils, those types of things. So there's still some funding left in that pot that we can keep doing moving forward. So we're looking forward to doing that. And the fourth one is what we've started from day one with the Resiliency Network is our learning network. And so that's been my favorite part of moving forward this year is that Lise and I are co-chairing our Resiliency Network meetings. And we're not just, you know, doing it 2 hours. We meet the third Thursday of every month. And people think we're crazy, but it's from 9 until 2, third Thursday, because there's a lot to talk about. And we've sectioned it so that from 12 into 2 is our learning network component. So last meeting we had Harry Farrell, who's the chief in New Maryland and president of the Capital District Firefighters Association, give a presentation on Voyage Alert, which is one of our 2024 projects. And we had Nursing Home Without Walls partner come and talk about the services that they're offering. So it's just an opportunity to learn so much from our neighbors. And we've got some really great ones coming up. In February, Lise will speak to this as well. But Lynn Ouellette is coming to do a workshop with us in February. So it's just an opportunity where we have all our partners together to really expand our learning and sharing with each other. I think that's all. Any?
I just had a comment.
Yeah.
A comment on, when you talked about the suicide prevention group that's doing their work, I've been out on a little speaking tour these days, it feels like, and one of the things I've noticed 988 and the lack of knowledge around that number
Yeah.
still, despite the fact that it's been operating well over here. So
Very good point.
anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because I think there's sort of a need for all of us to know the number, share the number, make sure that people know that that's
Fantastic.
available.
And I think, like, to your point of the speaking tour, maybe we need to have you come and join in our Resiliency Learning Network and share that, because I think there's some wealth of knowledge there that we could tap into.
We'll talk.
Yeah.
On my Zoom call.
I should have kept my mouth shut.
Meetings are fun.
They're fun.
Come to our meetings.
Yeah. That's a great.
Thank you very much, Gary. There's a lot of information there for everyone. Next up, there's no further questions. Sorry, go ahead.
One more question, just, so in terms of that small pot of funding for like bring communities together,
Yeah.
Neighborhood connections.
like, do we approach you directly for that?
Yeah, we can help with that.
Thank you,
Definitely.
thank you.
If there's a subdivision or a group that, you know, we like the neighbors to get to know each other, this is where the corn boils came in, and one of them, I think, had line dancing in the street, and it's just a way to build community within a subdivision, within a, you know, not for large events, but yeah, we were surprised not more people applied for it. It's there for the taking, and it's very useful.
Great conversation. Next up, we'll turn it back over to Lise for project date update.
A couple things that I wanted to add to Carrie. I don't think, I don't know if everybody here realizes. How many people do you send that distribution list to? I think there are over 200 people every month that we invite to our resiliency meetings. And it's interesting because every meeting, we'll get some people who've never been there. And then we'll get people who come that are regulars every time. So we kind of maintain the same size, but ever since we've added the educational component, I have a feeling everything's gonna grow. And now we're having to get a little better idea because of meals and things like that. So I'll start with my list of 8 initiatives for the commission, but everything we found that there was a lot of there were a lot of synergies there. There were a lot of things that we're doing together, and so that we're not doubling our efforts. We've started introducing some of my initiatives into the resiliency meetings because we're targeting a lot of the same people. So the first one, we plan on preparing up to 5 events promoting collaboration and asset sharing within Q1 or the fourth quarter. And as an example, we did a speed dating for nonprofits last year when I first arrived. We just basically brought people from all different groups, all nonprofit organizations, a lot of whom had never met each other, and we set them up and forced them on little dates all around the open lodge. And some connections that were made there after, a 12-minute meeting, and they've continued to this day, unlikely connections, sometimes seniors with kids groups or, Hayden Farmer with persons with disabilities or whatever, but we've had some really good success. So we'd like to recreate that either with focus groups. We may do one group that's a theme, for example, social isolation. We may have a group together that deals with seniors, that work with seniors to see if there are some synergies there, things that we can share. But one of the things that really was interesting is we were able to obtain from 211, because as you know, they are navigators and these have been there, they've been in existence, I think at least for 5 years. So they collect information about the calls that they receive. It's all private, of course, but they collect information about the kinds of calls they're getting, the kinds of needs that aren't met. So in other words, if they can't forward it on to an organization that looks after a certain need, they keep a list of them. So they call it their list of unmet needs. Well, we asked, Carrie and I were looking at, and we're going to obtain more information on how to read this list. It's quite complex, but we were surprised by some of the things that were unmet in our region. For example, one thing that kept coming up was eating disorders. There was very little help for people calling 911, looking for some help with, we were having, I think there are a lot of people calling about mental health issues, and there's limited help there, but specifically eating disorders. So that's something that we may want to have one of our events, bring in the experts on that. So we're going to study that a little bit more, and that'll help us decide what the next steps will be, perhaps in the fourth quarter to do some of those. Because the second one is, there are other things that we're doing in the first quarter already. So one of them is raising awareness for Fredericton Volunteer Connection. So as you probably know, this is a website where you match people in our area with volunteering opportunities. So we found that volunteerism is not as popular as it was when we were younger. We were encouraged to volunteer and give up our time, and less that's happening. I don't know if our kids are over programmed or what it is, but it's not happening as much as it used to. However, one trend that's also we're finding is that a lot of our newcomers are looking for an opportunity to volunteer because it's a good way to meet people. It's also a good way to network and perhaps find a job. So we're going to revive this, and I believe it's going to be, well, we're not going to revive it. We're going to allow the people who first had it, GFSI and Suzanne working on that, and I believe the United Way. So they're going to look at bringing it back, and we're going to make sure that we promote it more and raise awareness for this website. So the third one that I want to talk about is we're going to, in May, looking at the second quarter, we'd like to host an in-person training for nonprofit organizations on community engagement and collective impact. That is something that has been done in the past and met with great success. Again, it's all about tearing down silos and not, sort of doubling our efforts. We're doing a lot of really good work. in Fredericton and in our rural areas and in all our regions. Let's see about, sharing resources, sharing toolboxes, like we did for the gathering spaces and things like that. The fourth one, this is where Carrie and I got together and said, as part of the educational part of her meetings, her resiliency meetings, we're going to bring in Nina Ouellette to give a presentation on a social connector program. So I've got the definition here of a social connector program. It's a strategy that aims to provide support to those experiencing social isolation and loneliness by connecting them to existing interventions and community support services. Community connectors are individuals such as hairdressers, taxi drivers, who through everyday conversations find opportunities to connect people in need of support with 211 service navigators who can recommend appropriate services, supports, and interventions. So you're basically developing an unpaid workforce and a group of people, in hopes for better outcomes. So we're getting these people informed. And one of the best ways to inform them is to let them know about 211, what the navigators can do for them. 211 is a 24-hour day, 7-day a week. I forget how many languages, but it's way beyond French and English. I've called them myself for personal questions that I've had, and they've been excellent. They've been quick. When they didn't know the answers, they'll call you back. I definitely recommend them. So, what better way, to help and arm people or give them the tools that they need, because it's happening. It's happening organically. And so why not give them a hand? So Lynn is a researcher with St. Thomas University. She's so enthusiastic, and so interesting to listen to. So she'll be at our February 20th meeting in Restigouche. Of course, you're always all welcome. I feel like I've got my back here, Tim. I'm sorry about that. Number 5 is convening leading members of communities living with disabilities. So we would like in September, as part of our resilience meeting, when I believe we're on the Mocto that month. So our resiliency meetings are in a different area of our region every month. So we would like to get people, for example, Minlax, Jobs Unlimited, Marsh, to talk about some common projects that we could be working on there, because that is an important part of our social mandate as well. And it's important to work on social isolation, because that is a group that is highly subject to social isolation. Number 6 is enhancing partnerships with faith-based organizations. So we've already mapped out the churches in our regions. So we've been able to find what the churches are in each entity of Region 11. We've got that all electronically. We've also got an email distribution list, and we've already used it. So I sent an email to all these churches that I had inputted into my emails to invite them to our food forum that was held at the Wilmot Church. We want to make sure we've got the most up-to-date information, and we want to do more with that group, because as you know, the first people that get the knock on the door are those little church ladies, the outreach people in different, especially in rural areas. It's a really good way to get a hold of volunteers in those areas, because often the people who volunteer at the church volunteer at the fire station, volunteer in all the community. So we're looking at doing this, basically it's each quarter, but we're going to start with the meeting in Restigouche. We've already sent out, I think, 20 letters for people in Restigouche, Wasis, Nason Worth, Tracy, and Fredericton Junction. Basically, dear friend in faith, please come to our meeting, and we're going to talk about networking and have lunch and come and see what the files are that we're talking about at our resiliency meetings. So it's already begun and well on its way. The other one is we're going to host a grant writing course, again, as part of our resiliency meeting, but in March in Hanwell. And so we decided to hold it at Kingswood, because we're expecting to get more people than we do normally. We're going to expand this, but we're also going to ask people to RSVP. So we're going to have the same people who presented in Centerville. It was a great success by the SIM coordinator in Centerville. She brought in folks from Porter O'Brien and KPMG to do their not only a grant writing course, that'll be for 3 hours, but then for an hour and a half, we'll also have financial and sustainability best practices for not-for-profits and charities in today's world. So whether or not to apply for charitable status or charity status as an organization, and you can have that discussion. It's going to be kind of the speaker kind of walks around the room and it's not, it's very, what's the word that you're.
Engaged.
Exactly, it's a much more engaged thing. It's not a teaching, it's a teaching opportunity, but it's definitely, there are breakout tables and it's definitely more engaged. And the last one that I want to talk about is our regional transportation study. As you know, that has been ongoing. Englobe has been working on that study for the entire region. And I believe that the date for that work to possibly be done is we're looking at June. I'm not sure if that's final, but the other thing that we've added, is, urban rural rides promotion. So in other words, ESIC has put a lot of money towards transportation. It is a major priority for the province, and urban rural rides is, of course, is a ride program for people who need to get to dialysis, they need to get to medical appointments, they need to get to groceries. And they are looking to have more drivers. They need more drivers in more areas. And so there's going to be Brad James, who's our communications person, is going to be working for basically he's brought in a media, and I'm trying to remember the name, but Media Solutions Group that will help us advertise through Google. So when you watch the Weather Network, an ad will pop up about urban rural rides looking for drivers, or other places when you're on the internet, ads will pop up, you know, about urban rural rides, just as you're doing a search. I know in other areas of the province, they've been very active in Facebook, so that's how they chose to do it. But ours is going to be very aggressive, very quick, and I think it'll be very effective, and hopefully they'll see the benefits of becoming drivers for the urban rural rides program. Was there anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good. I'd like to make a few kind of contextual remarks. You've heard a lot today about activity. You can see there's a lot of activity, but we're cognizant of the fact that we're tasked with accomplishment rather than activity. Activity on its own is not what we're targeting, and so the 8, what I call Project 8. Those are the initiatives that this committee endorsed on up to the board, and the board decided to fund. And so we're starting the year. We've talked about the activity, but quarterly we're going to report to you about the progress with respect to those initiatives. And if you recall what I call the pretty sheets, which we distributed here again, the summary of the 8 initiatives, each of them identify not only what we're going to do, but how we're going to determine whether or not we've been successful. So quarterly, we're going to report on that, which will mean that in our April, May, October, and January meetings, we're going to be held to account not only about our activity, but about our success. I guess the one thing that I would want to say on behalf of Lise and Gary, as you can see, they're both high energy, committed people. What we're looking for from the committee, besides guidance, is input from what's happening in your community, what needs there are that you may think are unmet, that we might be in a position to meet. And in terms of not actually doing it ourselves, but being that social connector. As you can see, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of bringing people together for our 8 initiatives. There's already a platform that Carrie has created. And, we have mutual goals there, so we're using that as well. So it's the beginning of the year. We're cautiously optimistic, and we're looking forward to warmer weather, I guess, would be the way I would close that.
Here. Thank you, Don. Thank you again, Lise. I want to compliment everyone on the detail and the breakdown of this year's plan as well. Any other questions or general discussion from anyone on the committee?
I wanted to ask, Mr. Chairman, when when again was the, grant reporting?
The
Grant
grant
writing?
writing will be at the Kingswood Lodge on March 20th. So it's right here. I made little posters, just, in case you'd like to share that. The
Yeah.
only thing that I ask is that you let us know, that they let us know they're coming, just, we want to get the numbers for food, correct? Because we expect more people, to come to this than our usual resilience meeting. I think it's going to be a very useful, workshop. So that one's March 20th, and the one on, the social connectors is, February 20th in West Orange.
Maybe what we could do, Lise, is circulate to the committee electronically,
Absolutely.
and in fact, for both.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't mind if you helped us fill some seats.
Could I ask where the one in Restigornish is being held?
At the rec center on
Thank
Post
you.
Road.
Any other questions or discussion? Nothing further? There's no other
Are you-
discussion.
Are you on to, number 8 now?
Yep,
I had something I'd like to speak to, if I may.
absolutely.
Um, I might have trouble getting this all in a nice lineal kind of discussion, but we're what, into our 3rd year as a regional service commission?
Under this structure, I think to be charitable, I would like us to consider it as year 2. The first year was very much foundational year, and I've tried to convince people to refer to that as year 0.
That's fine. But I know the Community Development Committee mandate, it seems to be around social things. And I'm thinking for a small community like the one I live in, economic development is also community development in a real way. And when the RSC was being talked about and discussed, the Nackwick Millville wanted to maintain the system it had for economic development because we had a corporation established to do that. However, I think at that time the government was making decisions, and the government said, no, you got to do the one thing fits all, and Ignite will be your economic developer. Well, it's not working. We have Ignite has been in Nackwick on one occasion that I am aware of, and I attended that. And but we haven't had any communication about any reports, you know, what they've done, what has happened in Nackwick or Nackwick Millville. And my feeling is, if it isn't working, then let's not keep going down that road. And we still have a corporation established. But we had a lot of luck with what the corporation was able to do. And now it's down to 0 by Ignite. And I am not aware of anything that they've done that I could call a contribution or to something towards success. When I read through the documents, and I was reading the last few days about the Service Commission and this organization, they talk about one size doesn't fit all. And they talk about community people being the experts in their community. community people know their people, especially in small communities. And that's all I'm trying to talk about is, community somewhere around the size of the one I live in. I know Fredericton is different, Oromocto is different. But we can't use the same model for some communities as we use in others. And I think we have to come to a fork in the road where we have to do things a little different for some communities. And that's about flexibility. And because if we can't be flexible and in getting something that will work, and it is part of community development, but it's treated differently by the RSC. So I just want to make the point that the RSC and that's why I asked the question: are we in the second or third year? And if we're only in year 2, that's even better because it's a learning phase, and everything that was set up the first time may not be working for everybody. And it's time to rethink some of those things. And I'm hoping that flexibility is one of them. And if we can't get an economic development process or apparatus or organization that suits our needs, then we're kind of wasting money, and that part of our development is failing. We've got a lot of stuff going on in NACWIC, but we need complementary things to go along with it. And that's economic development, it's community development. So I'm hoping that the leaders of and the board of the RFC hears that and understands that and is prepared to make some changes. And I appreciate being allowed to speak to that today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in the interest of my own clarity, what are you proposing with regards to evolving or changes to the structure?
Well, in terms of flexibility, I'm thinking that is NACWIC Millville the only community who kind of wish things were done a little differently? Things worked better or can work better if they make a change. But I can only speak for us. We had a system for economic development that was working, and the government at the time said, no, you can't do that anymore. We're having great luck with Fredericton tourism, and that's working really well. But economic development with Ignite is just not cutting it. I mean, we don't get reports. I mean, there's no reporting. And at least we should get that.
Okay.
I guess so. And I'm hoping that the board will look at flexibility as a viable option in maybe all of the areas that they are concerned with, if they see the need and the need is expressed for it. But my interest today, most importantly, is on economic development in NACWIC Millville.
Mr. Chair, might I suggest that this get written up and submitted to the appropriate committee?
I'm not sure what the appropriate committee is.
Well, the Economic Development Committee.
So do we, okay,
Yeah,
that's just not been given to Ignite then.
Well, I think you need to put your concerns down on paper. You'll find things like lots of reporting online from Ignite you might want to take into consideration. And the government didn't tell any community to drop their economic development organization. You could have kept those. You kept ours at the city.
Yeah,
And so, they exist. They're supposed to be able to work complementary. But this is probably a conversation for the Economic Development Committee to have. Not a committee unprepared and not agended for it.
yeah.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, the line between economic development and community development was really clear 10 years ago. And But society's getting more and more complex, and the drivers to having an available workforce, successful businesses, a lot of those drivers lie in what was previously called the social issues, the things that the Community Development Committee is tasked with right now. So it's a complex circumstance. We do have an Economic Expansion Committee that oversees the contract that the RSC has with Ignite. So I think we need to understand that Ignite is contracted to do certain things for the Regional Service Commission. And if our constituent communities aren't happy, they should certainly raise those issues at the board table. And that's the method, well, through the Economic Expansion Committee to the board, and that's the path through to Ignite. And we're happy with this and we're not happy with that. Ignite has presented to that committee quarterly. With respect to why I call it the first year, year zero, I had a somewhat unique experience in that during the preparatory year, I was seconded to work for the province. I took a leave of absence from here, and I was one of the transition facilitators, not on the regional side of local government reform, but on the community side. And I can tell you that whole process had a very short time frame to introduce monumental change. And we are seeing impacts of that throughout the province now with respect to different levels of satisfaction with communities and councils, with regional service commissions. And, you know, if we take the longer view, in 5 years, we're going to look back and say, well, this was the adjustment period of the change. And it's the types of issues that you're raising, Bob, that are going to be dealt with. I think I'm not the staff lead on economic expansion, but I do attend as an observer. I think that group is more than prepared to hear Nakiwik Millville's concerns. I know that that they would be shared to some extent, perhaps not with the same volume level that Nakiwik Millville has. One of the things that we are, as a group, trying to get used to and digest is the difference between a local service and a regional service. So the RSC is tasked to deliver a regional service. And so when we look at our metrics, how are we doing to look regionally? Our directors struggle, or I should say are challenged in that they have to sit at our table with a regional view, but yet they're very much, they're in that position because of the local position that they have. The scale, you know, it's clumsy and awkward now, and probably will be for several years until we find that appropriate balance. But we won't find that appropriate balance if Nakiwik Millville's concerns are not, you know, put into the mix. I know that our director, your mayor from that area, has made this point. I haven't talked to him directly. My sense is he's frustrated about it. And by extension, I suspect maybe your council as well. So I don't have a magic wand, but I do think that we need to plug this in so it'll go through, and that the Regional Service Commission, who has a contract with Ignite, can say collectively, we're not happy with the reporting that goes to Nakiwik Millville, for example. And to make an effective complaint, I would suggest that, you know, when it comes to reporting, you might want to detail what you are looking for. Otherwise, we're trying to guess.
Okay, so I'll talk to my mayor over this.
Right.
And I think we'll follow Eric's suggestion and get a document to them, maybe a presentation.
I can't be certain. Kelly would know right off the top of her head. Tim is on finance. Your mayor is on finance. He's not on economic development, is he?
No, but I am.
But our chair is, and I think he's more than.
And so is Director Erickson too, I think.
Yeah, we have two people who've heard you firsthand.
Okay, well, I'll just get in touch with our chairman to find out when the next opportunity to present to their group or might happen.
Could be next Tuesday at the same time.
Tuesday?
That's the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Next Tuesday at 4.
That's at 4, yeah. Thank you, Kelly.
No problem.
I was a little concerned that I had that wrong in my head.
Okay.
Thank you very
Any other-
much.
Thank you. Any other discussion or directions for staff? If there's nothing further, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Very good.
Enjoy your afternoon, everyone.